Hazardous working conditions, poverty wages, environmental degradations are the dark side of the free market that allows business to externalize social and environmental costs of production to workers, societies, and the planet. Corporate social responsibility initiatives are the corporate defense lines to defy the growing criticism of their business model. These voluntary commitments serve the dual purpose of showing a corporate's efforts to comply with human rights obligations and of forestalling binding regulations that would limit entrepreneurial freedom. However, the systematic deficiency in global supply chains persists despite decades of CSR efforts of individual companies. The reason for the disappointing outcome is by and large structural. Even for well-intended companies, the scope of improvements is limited by market forces. All things equal, going alone in spending on social or environmental desirables is a competitive disadvantage. Everybody wants it, but hardly anyone does it, sums up the dilemma between CSR aspiration and business reality. Recognizing the limits of company-based CSR, business has pursued a myriad of joint initiatives seeking to generate a level playing field that allows ethical standards to prevail in a competitive environment. These initiatives want to square the circle by trying to achieve coordinated action without ultimately limiting the business freedom of participating companies. So far, this has resulted in smallest common denominator solutions like guidelines, recommendations, or commitments to due diligence processes. A multitude of good intentions, long-term visions, vaguely defined goals, and overrated changes are creating as much myth than realities about sustainability achievements. Beyond unilateral CSR efforts, there are few examples of binding or at least semi-binding agreements. The most effective is the Bangladesh Accord. The most widespread are global framework agreements. The most ambitious is Action, Collaboration, Transformation, a joint initiative of the Global Union Federation Industrial and major fashion brands launched in 2014 to achieve living wages in the garment industry. The Bangladesh Accord was the immediate outcome of the Rana Plaza disaster. With more than 1,000 dead bodies at their doorsteps, brands were ready to agree to a groundbreaking agreement. Fearing legislative measures, brands were for the first time willing to use their coordinated purchasing power to change the way the industry is operating. They signed a legally enforceable agreement on fire and building safety with two global union federations, Industrial and Uni Global Union, as signatories, and the most vigilant NGOs like Clean Clothes Campaign and Workers' Rights Consortium as witnesses. Its binding character made the Bangladesh Accord an outstanding success. It is this binding character, however, that many brands are opposing most in the current negotiations. By August 2021, a meaningful continuation of the Accord agreement is still under question. Brands' threats to walk away from the most effective agreement to protect workers' lives confirm the fact that without public pressure or binding regulation, cost saving tends to take priority over workers' lives. If the Accord has been so far the most effective international standard born out of the moral pressure caused by a terrible catastrophe, trade unions have on a daily basis tried to improve the commitment and accountability of multinationals through global framework agreements. Although not legally binding, these agreements create a greater accountability than unilateral codes of conduct. They are negotiated with global union federations and are a step towards cross-border collective bargaining. They have a monitoring and dispute resolution mechanism involving trade unions and require companies to respect the core ILO conventions. However, compliance with ILO core labor standards is compatible with a fully deregulated labor market, as long as no children are employed, forced labor is absent, all workers are treated equally good or bad, and the poor and weak are allowed to use collective action to try improving their lot. Neither core labor standards nor GFAs are beyond this bare minimum directly dealing with improving wages or working conditions of workers in the supply chain. ACT, Action, Collaboration, Transformation, is intended to move beyond core labor standards and to achieve living wages in the garment industry. ACT is suggesting that suppliers and trade unions should negotiate higher wages at the industry level. Brands would incorporate these higher wage costs in their purchasing prices. Setting wages for workers at national level guarantees a level playing field for all suppliers in the country. This ambitious concept of coordinated and negotiated solution is facing, however, severe challenges. In most countries, ACT members represent only 25 to 40% of the market share. ACT has slowly increased its membership, but has not succeeded to convince Nike, Adidas, Puma, Uniqlo, Aldi, Marks & Spencer and the like, let alone aggressive anti-union companies like Walmart and Amazon or any of the fast-growing Chinese retailers to join. Furthermore, national wage setting does not solve the issue of international competition. As brands tend to source from the most competitive location, supplier and governments fear that an increase of the wage level will lead to relocation of production. It is an open question how ACT plans to overcome the challenges outlined. You can read more about these initiatives in the background paper for this video lecture. In conclusion, the failure of voluntary CSR, the crisis of the Bangladesh Accord, the limited impact of global framework agreements, and the challenges ACT is facing show the need for supportive national and supranational regulations, such as trade preferences working for workers, presented in the background video to this lecture, or the EU due diligence law discussed earlier in this course. In this chapter, we will look at a few examples of binding negotiated agreements which aim at moving towards worker-centered social responsibility, as well as legal measures at national level which can facilitate such agreements.